Chapter 10. Dawn of Liberation. As the group emerged from Blackwood Forest, they felt the first true rays of sunlight on their faces, the warmth dispelling the lingering cold that had settled deep in their bones. For the first time since they had entered the cursed woods, they could breathe freely. The forest, once a place of nightmares, now seemed to breathe with them, alive and vibrant with the promise of a new beginning. Isolde lingered at the edge of the forest, her eyes sweeping over the canopy of trees that had once imprisoned so many lost souls. The weight of her family's sins still pressed heavily on her heart, but she knew she had taken the first steps toward redemption. The others gave her space, understanding that this moment was as much for her as it was for them. Zephyr, ever the leader, broke the silence. "We did what we came to do. The spirits are at peace, and the forest is free. Now, it's time for us to move forward." Orion nodded, already thinking ahead. "I'll compile everything we've learned. Make sure this story is told. No one should forget what happened here." Syrah, standing close to Thad, offered a quiet smile. "We'll make sure it's a story of hope, not just fear. A story of what we can overcome when we stand together." Thad, always the pragmatist, squeezed Syrah's hand. "And maybe, just maybe, people will think twice before they mess with forces they don't understand." Kali, ever the comic relief, couldn't resist adding her own twist. "Or, maybe they'll just think we're crazy. Either way, I'm good with it." The group shared a laugh, the tension finally lifting as they realized that they had survived and, more importantly, they had triumphed. The bonds forged in the heart of Blackwood Forest were stronger than ever, and each of them knew that this experience had changed them in ways they were only beginning to understand. As they began the walk back to town, Isolde found herself falling into step beside Zephyr. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Isolde," Zephyr began, choosing his words carefully. "I know this wasn't easy for you. None of it was. But you were brave, and you did the right thing. Don't forget that." Isolde met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the gratitude she felt. "Thank you, Zephyr, for everything. I know I have a long way to go, but I'm ready to face whatever comes next."
Zephyr gave her a small, encouraging smile. "You don't have to do it alone. None of us do." As they reached the edge of town, the first signs of life began to stir in the early morning light. The world beyond Blackwood Forest seemed almost mundane in comparison to what they had just experienced. But that normalcy was a welcome relief. The town, unaware of the harrowing journey the group had undertaken, was just beginning to wake up. A few shopkeepers were setting up their stalls, and the distant sound of a rooster crowing heralded the start of a new day. The group exchanged weary, knowing glances, each of them silently acknowledging that the world had changed for them, even if it hadn't for anyone else. "Home sweet home," Callie quipped, trying to inject some humor into the moment, though her voice was tinged with exhaustion. "Let's just hope it stays sweet," Thad replied, his tone half joking, half serious. Orion pulled out his phone, checking for any messages or missed calls. "It's strange. Everything here is exactly the same, but it feels like we've been gone for ages." Syrah nodded, her eyes scanning the familiar surroundings. "We have, in a way. We've been to a place most people can't even imagine. And we came back." Isolde looked at the group, the people who had stood by her side when everything seemed lost. She knew she owed them more than she could ever repay, but she also knew they would never ask for anything in return. "Thank you," Isolde said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Zephyr, ever the pillar of strength, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're a team, Isolde. We always were, and we always will be." As they began to part ways, each heading to their own home, the weight of everything they had been through finally started to settle in. They knew they would need time to process it all, to come to terms with the events that had unfolded in Blackwood Forest. But they also knew that they had done something extraordinary, something that had changed the course of history for that haunted place. For Isolde, the journey was far from over. She knew she had to make amends for her family's past, to find a way to live with the knowledge of what had been done. But for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a chance at redemption, a chance to build a future that wasn't defined by the sins of her ancestors.
As she walked through the quiet streets of the town, the sun fully rising behind her, Isolde felt a sense of hope that she hadn't felt in a long time. The forest was free, the spirits were at peace, and she was ready to face whatever came next. And she knew, without a doubt, that she wouldn't be facing it alone. The days that followed were filled with a sense of calm, a calm that the group hadn't known they craved until they finally experienced it. The nightmares that had haunted them after leaving the forest began to fade, replaced by a quiet resolve to move forward. Orion kept his promise, compiling their experiences into a detailed account of what had transpired in Blackwood Forest. He shared it with the others, ensuring that each of them had the chance to add their own perspectives, their own voices to the story. Collie, ever the entertainer, suggested they write a book about their journey, a fictionalized version. Of course, to protect the secrets they had uncovered. The others laughed at the idea, but there was a spark of interest in their eyes, a recognition that their story was one worth telling. Syrah and Thad continued to grow closer, their bond deepened by the trials they had faced together. They knew that their relationship had been forged in the crucible of fear and survival, but it was a bond that had proven stronger than either of them had expected. Isolde spent her days in quiet reflection, visiting the forest's edge but never venturing back inside. She knew she wasn't ready yet, that there were still too many ghosts, literal and metaphorical, waiting for her in those woods. But she also knew that one day, she would return. And when she did, it would be on her own terms. Zephyr, ever the protector, kept a close eye on his friends, ensuring that each of them was coping in their own way. He knew that their journey had changed them all, and he was determined to make sure those changes were for the better. As summer turned to fall, the group began to find a new normal. They still met regularly, their shared experiences binding them together in a way that nothing else could. But they also began to move forward, each of them finding their own path in the world beyond Blackwood Forest. For Isolde, the path was one of redemption, of finding a way to make amends for the past. For Syrah and Thad, it was a path of love, of building a future together. For Orion, it was a path of knowledge, of uncovering the mysteries of the world. For Collie, it was a path of humor and resilience, of finding light in the darkest of places. And for Zephyr, it was a path of leadership, of guiding those he cared about through whatever challenges came next. As the first snow of the season began to fall, the group gathered one last time at the edge of Blackwood Forest. They stood in silence, the snowflakes gently falling around them, a stark contrast to the dark and stormy night when their journey had begun. "I think we've earned a little peace," Zephyr said, breaking the silence. "But whatever happens next, I know we'll face it together." The others nodded, their hearts filled with a quiet sense of closure. The forest was at peace, and so were they. As they turned to leave, the wind whispered through the trees, a final farewell from the spirits they had freed. And as they walked away, the snow covering their tracks, they knew that no matter where life took them, they would always carry a piece of Blackwood Forest with them, its darkness, its light, and the unbreakable bond they had forged within its depths. The group's last visit to the forest's edge marked a turning point in their lives. The heavy weight of the past few weeks had begun to lift, replaced by the hope of new beginnings. Each of them had come out of the forest with more than just memories. They had discovered something profound within themselves. As winter set in, the small town near Blackwood Forest settled into its usual rhythm. The group of friends found comfort in the familiar routines of daily life, but they also noticed how different everything felt now. The town, with its quaint shops and cozy homes, seemed more vibrant, as if their ordeal had sharpened their senses and heightened their appreciation for the world around them. Isolde, who had once been burdened by her family's dark legacy, began to see herself in a new light. The courage she'd mustered in the forest had carried over into her daily life. She took steps to distance herself from her family's past, reaching out to historians and researchers to correct the record about the forest and the spirits trapped within. Her newfound determination brought her a sense of purpose she had never known before. One day, Isolde visited the town's small library. where she found an old ledger that documented the town's history. She carefully added a new chapter, one that told the truth about the curse of Blackwood Forest and how it was broken. As she penned the final words, she felt a wave of peace wash over her. The past was no longer a chain holding her back. It was a story that had been rewritten, with hope as this new ending. Sarah and Thad, who had grown closer during their time in the forest, were now inseparable. They spent their days exploring the town and its surroundings, finding joy in the simple pleasures of life. Their bond, forged in the fires of fear and survival, blossomed into a deep and abiding love. Thad, who had once been wary of getting too close to anyone, found himself opening up to Sarah in ways he never thought possible. Together, they planned for a future filled with adventure, love, and the occasional bit of mystery. Orion, always the seeker of knowledge, became somewhat of a local celebrity after he published his account of their time in Blackwood Forest. The book, though written as a work of fiction, captured the imaginations of readers far and wide. It became a bestseller, not just for its thrilling tale, but for the underlying message of courage, friendship, and the power of the human spirit. Orion's success brought him opportunities he had only dreamed of, but he remained grounded, knowing that the real treasure was the bond he shared with his friends. Collie, who had been the comic relief throughout their ordeal, continued to bring laughter and light to their lives. She found a way to channel her experiences into her stand-up comedy, crafting routines that were equal parts hilarious and poignant. Her performances resonated with audiences who had faced their own fears and anxieties, and Collie's star began to rise in the comedy world. Despite her growing fame, she never forgot the friends who had stood by her in the darkest of times. Zephyr, the steadfast leader who had guided them all through the forest's terrors, found himself drawn to new challenges. His experience had awakened in him a desire to help others navigate their own struggles. He began volunteering with local youth programs, mentoring kids who faced difficult circumstances. Zephyr's calm demeanor and unwavering support made him a natural leader, and he quickly became a beloved figure in the community. Though he rarely spoke of the events in Blackwood Forest, the strength he had shown there continued to inspire those around him. As the winter days grew shorter and the first hints of spring appeared, the group decided to gather one last time before their lives took them in different directions. They met at Zephyr's house, where a roaring fire and a table filled with food and drink awaited them. The atmosphere was warm and joyful, a stark contrast to the tension-filled nights they had shared in the forest. They spent the evening reminiscing about their journey, laughing at the absurdities and marveling at the bravery they had shown. There was a sense of closure in the air, a recognition that they had all grown and changed in ways they hadn't expected. As the night wore on, Zephyr raised his glass for a toast. "To us," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "We've been through hell and back, but we came out stronger. No matter where life takes us, we'll always have this bond. Here's to friendship, to love, and to the future." The others raised their glasses, echoing his words. They clinked their glasses together, the sound ringing out like a bell of hope. After the toast, the conversation turned to their plans for the future. Isolde spoke of her work to preserve the history of the forest and help those who had been affected by the curse. Sarah and Thad shared their excitement about traveling the world together, eager to see what adventures awaited them. Orion mentioned the offers he'd received to write more books, though he admitted he was still trying to process everything that had happened. Collie, ever the entertainer, talked about her upcoming comedy tour, which would take her to cities she had only dreamed of visiting. Zephyr listened to them all, a quiet smile on his face. He was proud of each of them and grateful for the role he had played in their journey. When it was his turn to speak, he kept it simple. "I'm just looking forward to seeing where life takes us all. Whatever happens, I know we'll stay connected. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a new chapter." The evening continued with stories, laughter, and a deep sense of camaraderie. As the fire burned low and the hour grew late, the group slowly began to say their goodbyes. There were hugs and promises to keep in touch, with each of them knowing that these promises were more than just words. as Isolde, Syrah, Thad, Orion, and Kali left Zephyr's house and stepped out into the crisp night air, they felt a sense of peace and contentment. The sky was clear, and the stars above seemed to shine brighter than ever, as if reflecting the bond they shared. Zephyr stood at the door, watching them go. He knew that they were all heading in different directions, but he also knew that the connection they had formed was unbreakable. Blackwood Forest had tested them, pushed them to their limits, but it had also brought them together in a way that nothing else could. As the last of his friends disappeared into the night, Zephyr looked up at the sky, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He had led them through the darkness, and now they were all heading toward the light. It was a new dawn, not just for the forest, but for all of them. And in that moment, Zephyr knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them with the same courage, friendship, and hope that had seen them through the darkest night of their lives. The next morning, as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Zephyr awoke with a sense of anticipation. The world was filled with possibilities, and he was ready to embrace them all. Blackwood Forest was now a place of the past, a chapter that had been closed, but the lessons learned there, the bonds forged, and the strength discovered would stay with him and with all of them forever. With a final glance at the rising sun, Zephyr stepped out into the day, ready to face whatever came next.